So I bought an old Honda and took a 10,000 miles solo road trip for 2 months. Starting from California, I drove east through Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, and Louisiana. In the last video, I spent about a week in a small Louisiana city called Lafayette. All you need to know is that I love that city so much I didn't want to leave. If you wish to know what had happened previously, you can check out the links in the description box. In this episode, I will cover my adventures in New Orleans and Alabama, including a crazy sunset, a cool plantation tour, and many more. If you want to support this channel and future videos, you can subscribe, comment, or like, but no pressure. The drive from Lafayette to New Orleans took me about 2.5 hours. I chose the longest route to drive because I wanted to be as close to the Gulf of Mexico as possible. On the way there, I saw cars being pulled over in front of my eyes, a bridge with impossible slope, and a lot of rain. The first hostel I stayed was in the city center. It was easy to walk around the French Quarter and local markets. I was more than happy when I found out there was a trolley station next to my hostel. From the moment I saw these Louisiana trolleys in the movie, I had wanted to ride one of those. And here I was, riding the exact trolley I saw in the movie.
When's that ever gonna happen?
French Quarter was fantastic. There were carnival shows, exotic buildings, antique stores, and museums that sold European jewelry, paintings, furniture, even toys that dates back to the 16th century. So if any of you are interested in buying this, here's the number you should call. Also, I randomly walked into a store that came up with a lot of hilarious sentences regarding alcoholism. I was trying really hard not to laugh out loud, so please allow me to share some of my favorites.
This beer tastes like I'm not going to work tomorrow. Alcohol, because no great story ever started with someone eating a salad. You are not really drinking alone if your kids are home. Whiskey probably won't solve your problems, but it's worth a shot.
Okay, I think that's enough. And like every other store in New Orleans, oyster shells were indispensable. I was super glad when I realized the buildings in the Curious Case of Benjamin Button were just a few blocks away from my hostel. I went there immediately and found so many filming locations from the same neighborhood almost effortlessly. I'm the kind of guy who is really into filming locations, because to me, being there personally feels like becoming part of that movie. The next day, I signed up for a tour in Destrehan Plantation. It was an eye-opening experience. I had heard a lot about those plantations, but had never seen one. The tour guide showed us around, told us how the owners had lived, where the slaves had worked, the rebellions, massacres, distribution of the plantations in Louisiana. I was especially surprised by the amount of plantations there used to be. All these rectangular lands on the map were plantations. Every inch of the riverbank was occupied. Countless Africans suffered and died here. Meanwhile, countless European families thrived. In life, there was so much insult and injury, and we had no choice but to collect what was ours. I will never forget what I learned in Destrehan Plantation. My second hostel was in the suburb. It was quieter, older, closer to Lake Pontchartrain, and raised a lot more stairs. Back then, European sailors and the pirates of Caribbean all believed that there is a point where the entire world just stops existing. If you go beyond that point, you fall off. And they call it World's End. Before the day I went to Lake Pontchartrain, I had always thought the Flat Earthers was a bunch of lunatics. But I have to say I changed my mind after seeing how the sun set in Lake Pontchartrain. I'd say the Flat Earthers are not completely crazy. Let me show you why. So I went to the Lake Pontchartrain for the sunset because I had a hunch that something incredible was about to happen. And I was right. Throughout my short life, I had seen quite a few unforgettable sunsets in Costa Rica, in Panama, in Maui, but none of them was as remarkable as the one I saw in Lake Pontchartrain. The gigantic sun literally fell off the horizon. It went down bit by bit until it finally disappeared. And all of this happened in front of my own eyes. At that moment, I suddenly understood why pirates back then believed in World's End. I mean, if I see sun falls off like this every single day, I would no doubt become a flat earther. In terms of food, I tried all kinds of oyster I could get my hands on. Raw oyster, garlic oyster, roast oyster, and many beers. The only regret I had was not being able to see an equally beautiful sunrise. I woke up at 4:30 one morning and went to the lake again, hoping to see something spectacular. But the sunrise wasn't very great. I left Louisiana the day after and drove to Alabama, the 22nd state, and the sweet home for nearly 5 million people. In order to reach Alabama, I must drive across the famous Lake Pontchartrain Causeway, which is the longest continuous bridge over water in the world. Being 23.83 miles long, the causeway took me over 20 minutes to cross. It was such a special experience. Before leaving New Orleans, I was told USS Alabama would be on my way to Mobile. I made a quick layover, but since I arrived a bit too late, the battleship was closed for the day. I took a few pictures of it and moved on. Mobile rained and rained. The most memorable thing I did there, other than this drone footage, was perhaps the food I had in this crazy-looking restaurant. Life was good in Sweet Home, Alabama. There was nothing to complain about. The next day, I left for Montgomery. At that point, I was officially done driving east and would be driving north for the next couple of weeks. I didn't do much in Montgomery. My hostel was almost empty. I spent a lot of time in the living room working on a set job. And when I got tired, I would go get some groceries and cook something legendary. I left Montgomery 2 days later. My next stop in Alabama was Birmingham. It was only a 1-hour drive away, but the trip to Birmingham was quite eventful. After putting all of my stuff in the car, normally the last thing I did before driving was to set up the navigation. But I was dumbfounded that morning when Apple Map told me it was impossible to drive to my Airbnb, because the Airbnb I booked was in Great Britain. And I was like, holy Moses, of course it was. I completely forgot there was more than one Birmingham in the world, and the other one was apparently more popular on Airbnb. In the end, I had no choice but to cancel the one in Britain and booked another one right away. Thankfully, this time I didn't mess up, and the room was absolutely gorgeous. The house was looked after by an elderly couple. They were super friendly and even gave me a free history lecture on Birmingham, not the British one. The old gentleman told me that he was considering selling the house and use that money to buy a boat instead. The house was over 100 years old, and they were getting too old to take care of it. He wanted to sail across Atlantic when he still could, and I was thinking to myself, maybe I should do something like that one day. The room they prepared for me reminded me of my time in Italy. The wooden floor, wooden bathroom, the handmade soap, white curtain, dreamy sunshine, and a trace of unknown fragrance. Honestly, I felt sleepy the moment I opened the bedroom door. I would like to spend more days there if I could, but unfortunately, it was fully booked for the next couple of days. After knowing I couldn't spend too much time here, I decided to enjoy every moment I had with that place, and didn't go out much in Birmingham. The only thing I did outside of my Airbnb was to drive to a lake nearby, flying my drone.
Fly me to the sky, above the clouds where all the stars are circling around with you. Take me to the ground and get me a pair of red roses in the garden with a full of blooming flowers. The earth and joy to see you, a lovely boy, but all I will feel is the blue. All I could think of is you. Then I'd wear the stories from head to head.
Alright, I should stop this part of the story here. In the next episode, I will cover my adventures in Tennessee, Kentucky, Indiana, Illinois, and hopefully we can get to Wisconsin. Thank you for watching. If you want to support this channel, subscribe, comment, and like will be very helpful. If you have any questions, you can either leave a comment or hit me up on my Instagram @JingWuShow. The next part will be out as soon as possible. Bye.